All right.
Wait, let's get Jacob. You speeding? Okay, here we go. Tommy Wilson.
Take one.
There you go.
All right. Tom,
Jeff,
nice to see you, brother.
great to see you.
What I'd like to do is talk a little bit about a couple things. Intersection, the history of George H. Wilson. And then secondly, I want to talk about what it means for you to be a part of this still. How many years down the road are we?
From the start of George Wilson?
Yeah,
It started in 1921, so
we're celebrating 100.
we're,
So first
we're
century.
right on 100.
We're right on cue. So, what I want to do is talk to you about what that means to you. And one of the things that I want to talk, I know what it was like for me to work on the wharf in my family and to have that sense of tradition. And I want to talk to you later on about that. But let's just kind of do a little chronological roll. And you can talk as in-depth as you want. And if I think you're getting too lost in the weeds, I'll just go, hey, okay?
That's fair enough.
It's easy. We can do whatever we want here. We could play catch. We could change the subject. We can do whatever.
Okay.
It's easy. So, all right. As you know, I have longtime family connects here too. So I've always been fascinated by George H. Wilson. And I've read a lot of the History Sent You stuff I found. But in your head, how does this place start? Where does the moment of creation come for George H. Wilson? Talk about that a little bit.
I think we need to go back to the late teens, maybe 1920. My grandfather, George Wilson, was working for a company by the name of Byrne Brothers, and he developed a great relationship and respect for a gentleman by the name of Bert Eisant. And after perhaps a year or so of working together, they decided to open up a company, Eisant and Wilson. And that company remained intact until right after World War II, 1946, when Mr. Eisant retired, then became George Wilson, and then it became a corporation in the early 50s.
One of the things we talked about, the roots of this actually, a little bit around World War I, right? Your grandfather comes back to town. Was he in the war?
He was in the Army.
Okay, talk about that. So George, your grandfather was?
Sure. My grandfather was in the Army during World War I. Did not go overseas. He was stationed up in Washington State, Fort Townsend, I think. That may not be right, but
Port Townsend.
Yeah, it's Port Townsend, but it was Fort something.
Okay.
At any rate, he was in the motorcade. He drove trucks, and he always had an affinity to driving trucks and driving motorcycles and things like that. So he had a good experience in the military and had some close friends. Then came back here and then went to work with Byrne Brothers.
Okay. In those early days here in Santa Cruz, what were some of the projects they worked on, and what was it that sort of set the tone for the company?
I think in the early days they were primarily residential projects, and as the history of the company progressed, there really wasn't a turning point in terms of commercial work until really the early 50s. And at that point, my father's emergence into the company opened up the door to more commercial work that we can get into in a bit. I think
So Santa Cruz is a small town,
small town, yes.
and they're building little bungalows here. So that was that what are we talking about? We're talking about little bungalows primarily in Santa Cruz County?
Yeah, in fact, one of the things that I shared with Joel earlier was that the history of Seabright, where there was a developer, James Pilkington, and my grandfather worked for him with houses in the Seabright area. He did, prior to becoming involved in plumbing and sheet metal, he did a lot of interesting jobs. He actually made it through early high school and then decided that that was enough. Worked up the coast in Swanton for doing baling hay and things. He did other things that he was a volunteer with the fire department and sort of evolved into this mechanical thing. And it was something that worked for him, and then early into the history of the company, my grandmother was instrumental in playing a role. And she was here doing the accounting and worked hard, right shoulder to shoulder.
I didn't know that part. So talk a little bit about your grandmother. Where was she from?
Well, it's interesting there is that her relatives go back to Boulder Creek in about 1860. And so she's part of the community and a very hard worker who played a big role in the formation of the company.
Wow. So what was her full name and maiden name, and what did her family do up in Boulder Creek?
The family name that was up in Boulder Creek was Roy and Hibbards. They were in lumber. Her maiden name was Wasget, and actually her father worked for Southern Pacific until he had a pretty horrific accident, lost a hand, and then became a foreman for Granite Construction and worked on Chittenden Pass. So history has been part of our family. It's a big part of, and it's very important. So
one of the things that interests me about this story, because I've seen the timeline, and I remember when you had your other anniversary here and stuff, was just how much the history of Santa Cruz County from World War I on sort of parallels the growth of George H. Wilson. They kind of grow together. There's a symbiotic relationship that happens, you know.
I agree with you. There are lots of projects and buildings and interactions that whether it's the employees or the customer base, that it became a very interactive growth throughout the time. I think that certainly during the 20s they developed a foundation to stand on. They survived the 30s. During World War II was not easy because metal was scarce, and obviously in the mechanical industry you need metal products, pipes, duct, things like that. Gasoline was scarce. My grandfather used to drive like a 1-ton truck to San Francisco to buy parts and collect it. You know, during our era, wholesalers would to deliver the products.
Yes, we had to go during World War II. We had to go up
for fish, deliver fish.
So let's talk a little bit about your pop and World War II. Now, remind me, your dad was in the class of
1940, I believe.
That's right. Okay. So your dad served in World War II.
Yes,
Talk a little bit about your pop. He grew up in the business here.
he did.
Talk his name, tell us his name. And
So my father, Jim Wilson, was in the service. He was in the Army Air Corps, served in the Pacific Theater, and upon his return from the war and activities, he entered college, went to Salinas Junior College, which is Hartnell, then went to San Jose State, and basically it was perceived that he was having too much fun at San Jose State, and so my grandparents shipped him off to a engineering school in Milwaukee. And so he really didn't have a choice, that he was going to come back here and be part of this. Unlike my brother, my sister, myself, our parents gave us every choice in the world to do it, and we ended up working here.
So Jim goes off to Milwaukee, comes back, and he explained it once to me. He saw after World War II, Santa Cruz goes through this incredible growth period.
Mm-hmm.
And what was a very narrow economic base sort of implodes here. It just expands, population expansion. And your father saw an opportunity for growth and expansion.
He did, and I think perhaps seeing Santa Cruz from afar brought in that perspective. He, early in the 50s, there was an opportunity at Lockheed Test Base in Bonnie Doon, and he saw that opportunity, bid some projects, and the general contractor at the time, which was a well-known name of Carl M. Swenson, and built the Palomar Hotel, perceived that the company wasn't big enough to execute the contracts. So they created a joint venture with a couple of companies from San Jose, and it was really the first exposure to larger scale construction. That led to my father's 40-year involvement with the Santa Clara Contractors Association, and 20 years of an office in Santa Clara during the build-up of what has become Silicon Valley. So he was in the right place at the right time. It also provided him an opportunity to develop his career and have my grandfather operate the business and my grandmother operate the business here in town.
Okay, so I'm gonna make a little argument with you, and you think about this. He may have been in the right place at the right time. That's a simple explanation.
Mm-hmm.
But it seemed to me that your dad saw the opportunity and made sure he was in the right place at the right time. I mean, he saw what was happening over there. He sensed that there was this economic boom coming.
I think you're right. He also knew that you couldn't stretch out the infrastructure of the company that we had, and knew that he had to maintain the customer base here, and that was super important to him. And I think he developed rapport and relationships with numerous facility directors, owners, and things that range from hospitals to developing a rapport with the manager at Wrigley's when that was built, the manager at Lipton when that was built, and countless relationships with the folks at UCSC, the Dominican Hospital, Watsonville Hospital, Community Hospital of Monterey. and those were lifelong career relationships. So, and I think something that maybe I was remiss earlier, my grandfather sort of set the tone with an approach that quality work was paramount, repeat business was critical, and that you treated people the way you wanted to be treated. And we've certainly tried to do that carrying forth. And that's what's kept this company close to 100 years in the making.
I remember your grandfather. What year did he die?
1991.
Okay. And how old was he when he died?
He was 98.
Yeah.
He was 6 weeks shy of 99.
Yeah. So I remember him. I really didn't know him. Talk a little bit about these characteristics, these character traits that he had and that he sort of imposed on this 100-year.
He demanded discipline, demanded respect, really advocated having a clean office, clean yard, clean trucks, clean installations. And it was very important for him that people were proud of the workmanship that they did, and that customers were grateful for the work that was completed. My grandfather was a self-made man that worked hard at figuring out the best way to get things done.
Okay. Which leads to your dad, who I did know well, and who I always enjoyed conversing with. One of the things I noticed about your pop, and this is true about the next generation, there's a personability. He believed that you had human encounters with people. Mm-hmm. And he liked to converse with people, and it wasn't a glad-handed thing. It was just, equals. He enjoyed that sort of thing. It seems like that permeates everything here.
I think you're right. We certainly have tried to develop a family approach, respectful of employees, respectful of customers, and try to maintain that rapport. But you're right. I think my father was more outgoing than my grandfather. My grandfather was more driven, maybe because of the times, that this was the goal: keep the company going, make ends meet, and they worked hard at doing that.
We've talked about a lot of the institutions that your father developed relationships during his tenure here. Lipton, Wrigley's, all of that. Can you think of any more? I mean, you kind of went over the big ones, but it seems like there are a lot of smaller ones. I mean, I know they were on the wharf. I don't.
Oh yeah. No, I remember, speaking of the wharf, that the king of the wharf, Malio, was a big deal, and going down with my father to a project on the wharf was always exciting. It was full of life, and so certainly the activities at the wharf, the Seaside Company, that was instrumental. Saul's Leathers was a big deal. Various hotels where boilers were installed, and then schools. After 1950 on, the whole output of schools was huge, and to this day, schools play a main part of our market.
All the Santa Cruz City schools,
Mm-hmm.
Pajaro Valley?
Yeah.
What are all the districts you guys are involved with?
Right now, we have contracts with Santa Cruz City Schools, Pajaro Valley. We've worked with San Lorenzo. We've worked with Scotts Valley. We did a project a couple years ago for Kirby School. We work up in Davenport at the landing there. We have worked for Monterey Unified School, Salinas Schools. So it's a main component of what we do to this day.
Okay, so you have this side of basis in these communities, both through the educational system. What about with government institutions here? I'm curious.
Sure. Working with Santa Cruz County, we're involved in lots of maintenance projects. Good, bad, or indifferent, we were involved in the county office building at 701 Ocean Street. We get involved in working for state parks, whether it's at Wilder, we've done some work there, we've done some work at Big Basin. Pretty much the company grew from the domain of Santa Cruz County to the Monterey Bay Area, and has remained, that has remained as our main and primary market.
How about Silicon Valley now today? What's going on there with you guys? Do you reach out there as much, or?
We don't reach out as much as we did. In the early 80s, the company was in the trough of an economic wave, and we needed to scale back, and so we closed an office that had been actually quite robust in the Santa Clara Valley. It operated for 20 years, but never really was a successful operation. They did a lot of work, but necessarily wasn't economically profitable. So, directly to your question, we now work over in the Santa Clara Valley on specific projects that it makes sense for the owner and it makes sense for us to be involved. Our whole new relationship with ACO Engineered Systems has now reintroduced us to opportunities in the Santa Clara Valley. So we'll see where that takes us.
Okay, you've obviously had a long-term association with the business, but I know you didn't come directly to the business. Had a high school and college.
That's true.
Okay.
And actually, if there's a lesson learned, that's probably the most valuable thing I ever did.
Which was
that I didn't come straight to work in a family business. After high school, I went to Cabrillo and then UC Davis, and then fell into an opportunity working for a startup electronics company here in town. Worked there 7 years, doing lots of things that really did not have any training for, and you just had to roll up your sleeves and figure it out. So with that, I came back to work here in 1985 after my brother had returned, and had the confidence to be able to deal with situations here that I'm convinced wouldn't have had if I'd come straight into the business. And I think that's a really valuable lesson for people to, if you grow up here in town, you have an opportunity to travel, or you have an opportunity to really get your feet wet doing something else, because you learn how to deal with people, you learn how to solve problems, and it was a real valuable thing. And I often, I'm very thankful that I had that opportunity to go work somewhere else before coming here.
Since you've been back, you worked shoulder to shoulder with your dad, your brother, your sister, and you've gone through your dad's passing, and now whatever it's called with this new business, is it selling to or corporation of, what do you call that?
Well, a year and a half ago, we sold the assets of the building business to a company by the name of ACO Engineered Systems. And they are continue to be a very large mechanical contractor. They do exactly what we do. They understand the things, the challenges that we faced. And it was our internal decision, the family's decision, that it was the best way to keep the business in a sustainable manner so that the 80 plus or minus employees had a place to continue to work. The family, all of the offspring in my generation, no one was interested in carrying on, getting involved in the business. And so we now have, the idea was to infuse some new energy and new employees to keep it a viable operation. And we've had some transition challenges, but in the big picture, I think it's gonna work out really well.
Okay, what was it like working in the family business and feeling that legacy, that heritage, that commitment to your grandpa? Because I know you were tied with your grandpa and your dad. What was it like feeling that family, not pressure? I sort of the beauty of that family legacy and heritage. Talk a little bit about what that meant to you doing that.
I'm going to touch on the pressure a little bit.
Okay.
But then I think it goes full circle.
Yeah.
And that is that being involved in a family business, you have a deep understanding of what it takes to keep the doors open, and you tend to work harder to prove that it's not a nepotism issue, and that you work harder to overcome that opportunity. And with that said, you develop a work ethic that is strong and gets you through the highs and lows of the business. So the upside of that is that you're part of a team and you're part of a successful group of people that are really talented, that make really exciting things and can accomplish a lot of goals. So it's been a great ride, but it's like anything, it has its ups and downs.
Gonna get a little philosophical here, and this may be BS, but I'm gonna try it.
Okay.
The primary function of any civilized society is figuring out how to get the water in and the sewage out.
Waste out.
Yeah, that's kind of the basic element of any social entity. Whether it be Rome, whether it be the Mayans, whether it be gold rush immigrants to San Francisco, whatever it is, you got to get water in and the sewage and dispose out. What's it like being linked to that sort of elemental nature of the community? Because we don't often see it, right? You don't see the water coming in, and right?
Often, the systems that we get involved in, you don't see. And you don't see them, you don't interact with them, and that's a good thing. The corollary is of a quality umpire in baseball. If you don't see or hear him, he's doing a really good job. Our systems that we get involved in are often covered up by dirt, covered up by ceilings, and but I think what's kept us going is that they've been installed in a quality fashion that if you did uncover them, they would be a beautiful piece of art.
Beautiful piece of art. Do you view plumbing as an art form? Is that
Absolutely.
okay? I'm gonna talk a little bit about that. I mean, we've never had this discussion.
No, I think that plumbing's an art form. Sheet metal work is an art form. I think that the group of people that we've had over the years have contributed incredible things to the community. On focusing just in terms of pieces of art, we've at one point we built like 12-foot stainless steel redwood trees for Red Tree Properties. We had a very dedicated individual that built
Okay, hold on. What's that?
I don't know.
It's not mine.
I know, it's a GoPro, I think it's dead.
Let it, okay.
What's dead?
The battery
camera.
died. I don't know. I don't know the message on it.
Okay.
Okay, sorry about that.
No, that's okay.
So,
And
Yeah,
that's
it's-
my point. If something happens, you stop. You know.
yeah.
You want to make sure we get this. So.
Nico, you got the remote for the thing to stop it there.
We good?
We're good.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm gonna,
And how far are we into this interview, time-wise?
31 minutes.
Huh?
31 minutes.
Perfect. Okay.
sorry,
Never-
Jeff, one more thing.
No, we're easy.
Just go to drop.
Apologies.
Yeah, I'm trying
You
to
could
turn
have
it
seen where I've
off.
sliced it out sometimes and blow your
Huh?
mind.
Tell it, just tell it.
GoPro, turn off.
I think it's on.
Uh,
GoPro, turn off. There we go.
It's still on. GoPro, turn off.
There you go, it's It's off.
Okay.
You good?
Yeah, jeez.
Basta così?
Yeah.
I once shot in a public, really poor bus station in Port of Spain, Trinidad and Tobago, and the electricity coming in was really uneven, and they were worried about blowing off out the cameras, and it blew out the lights. It was very intense, and there were criminal elements around wanting to steal the equipment. It was. You had to take control of the situation, though, man. Got some good interviews there. All right, so we were talking about the art projects that you've worked on. Yeah. Why don't you go start over again with that?
So, working with sheet metal, working with pipes, plumbing is an art form in terms of figuring out how to fit it in a space and things. But specific art projects we've gotten involved in the past of building large objects such as redwood trees for Red Tree Properties, and also another one that comes to mind is the tribute to the folks from the earthquake memorial on Pacific Avenue. That was done with a group here. Small yard art. Angela Grova used to come in here and do things. We've done bases for Mike McClellan and his rock artwork. So I really think that certainly the sheet metal workers are artists in their own right, as well as plumbers.
Absolutely. Anywhere else you want to go with this right now in this first run through? Anything you'd like to cover?
Maybe I didn't cover my grandfather's his story when he came here.
Oh yeah, let's talk a little bit about that, because I remember finding a clip of him in like '04 or something like that, right?
Actually, he came a little earlier.
Okay, yeah, I remember finding it.
He
Just start over.
Okay.
Why don't you open with my grandfather first came here from and how
Sure.
that happened? Okay.
So, my grandfather first came to Santa Cruz in 1899. He was 4 years old. His father had been involved in a general store that burned down, and his wife died at childbirth of my grandfather's younger sister. So his life, he needed to start over. So he left Merrill, Wisconsin, came to California, found Santa Cruz, bought a small little house up Rodeo Gulch, and then called for the family. My grandfather came with his 2 older sisters and the younger sister with an aunt, and they came to Santa Cruz. And the father tried and got involved in all kinds of different businesses, but my grandfather was independent, and so he was always getting in trouble. He was a character, and that spirit got him involved in experimenting with lots of different jobs. School was not his forte, and so he left school probably maybe his sophomore year in high school, and then got involved in working in Seabright, working up in Swanton, joining the Army, doing all these things, and then got involved in plumbing and sheet metal.
Perfect. That's right, he and Malia were about the same age.
1895 is when he was born.
Okay, Malia was 1900, so
Yeah.
same generation.
Yeah.
But I remember when Malia used to see your dad at the wharf, and your granddad, but it was like, "Hi George, hey George, how are you, George? Good to see you, George." I mean, they had a pretty good rapport.
Yeah, they did, and both my grandfather and grandmother, they enjoyed that interaction at the wharf. Fishing was a great recreation for them. They also it was a big part of my memory of growing up. We would continue a family tradition of going clamming for Pismo clams, and up until the mid-70s when the crop sort of dwindled. But that was a big deal to not only for a food source, but just as the whole family activity.
Where'd you guys go primarily? Like Manresa?
From Rio Del Mar to
What's that?
Sunset, all through that area.
Yeah.
And you could go, you could go to Rio Del Mar Boulevard and take a Jeep down onto the sand, and it was, that was a pretty exciting thing to do as a little kid. The water was still pretty cold, and wetsuits weren't in vogue.
You know, and I remember on the Forks they had that
The 5
sizer.
inch.
Yeah, and you were always wanting to make it fit, make sure it fit.
Yep.
Yeah. That was,
Because the game warden was up there eyeing you.
all right. So what was his name?
The game warden?
Yeah.
Oh, geez, I have no idea.
Oh, come on, really? I'm trying to remember. I'll get in a second. Forrest McDermott.
Oh,
McDermott was the right.
well, that's good.
That was good. Yeah, no, he was tough. Yeah, and he busted people periodically.
Sure.
So I mean, your family's just been part of the community too. I mean, and George H. Wilson supports a lot of things in the community. It's symbiotic again. You've been part of this your whole life. What's that mean to you? What is it?
Certainly being part of Santa Cruz is a very important part of my makeup. I love traveling, but I love to come back here, and I love to interact with friends like you and other people. It's important to me to be able to be proud of what we do and how we do it, and always putting our best foot forward. And so I'm definitely ingrained in the operation of Santa Cruz County, and I think that with that, the company follows, and the company supports a lot of folks in ways similar to what you were talking about before, the infrastructure not being seen, that we try to support people the best we can. Sometimes it's below the radar, and which is fine. And it's because I think that the healthy community is important to the overall mix for everyone.
Anything else?
Don't know.
Tell you what, not for this time.
Yeah.
Keep a little notepad, and
Yeah.
if there's things you feel you want to get in this, just start taking a note or two,
Yeah.
and get it the next time.
Sure. Yeah. No, I think we're doing.
You get 2 at-bats in this one at least, so.
Always needed 2 at-bats.
Yeah. we
Or
all,
more.
we all did.
Okay. Well, let me get Mike.
Okay, and do we have a place where we're gonna put Goldie?